Welcome to Paradigm Playbook, the podcast on the business of sports. With 50 plus years of experience, Steve Cook shares insights weekly, featuring top playmakers shaping the industry. Get ready to script your next play. Now, here's your host.
Hello and welcome to Paradigm Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Cook, and I'm alongside my new friend, Mandy Morris, that we just met recently, but I'm so excited about having Mandy on. Mandy's in a different world than I am in terms of academic background and what she does for a living, but she is and I'm going to get this wrong, a psychological coach. Is that fair?
That's fair, yeah.
Okay. But she's also the founder of a company. She created an app. She's done a TED Talk that's fantastic. And we will link that at the end of this so everybody can go see Mandy's TED Talk. It's wonderful. But Mandy, before I go on and say something really stupid, why don't you introduce yourself in any way that you like, however you like to be known?
Sure. I'll start by giving a little bit of background on who I am as a person and kind of lead into what I do, because as a kid, I was a highly sensitive person, I would say. And I would say I could feel the room before anyone would say anything. And I was also really good at flying under the radar because I was picked on a lot as a kid. And when you go through something like that, you learn real well how to scan rooms, how to pick up on people's emotional energy, and you start figuring out who you need to be and how you need to belong. And so somewhere along the way, I became really good at reading people. I didn't have language for it then, Steve, but I was studying human behavior long before I ever had a degree in it. And so my path into this work definitely wasn't linear. I originally went to school to be an athletic trainer. So I was huge into sports, was really good when I was younger, until I started to get more into the therapy route. And to this day, I still don't remember how I got involved volunteering at this crisis resource center, but I started volunteering in college at this crisis resource center, and something just shifted. I found that I enjoyed being with these women in these crisis situations more than I enjoyed going to my classes. And I think I was outgrowing the sports arena. And because of that, and I had started in my own therapy for the first time as well, and my love for the brain, I switched my major and I ended up getting my master's in clinical counseling and eventually trained in trauma work and eventually became this really long acronym called EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is just a type of trauma therapy. And I was drawn to it because I saw how much human behavior is driven by the things that people don't consciously remember, but it absolutely shapes our behavior. And so in my TEDx talk, I talk about what we call these small t traumas. And for people listening who are like, what is that? It's the thing we think about when we think about trauma. It's these really extreme things. But in reality, 80% of the population, we all have what's called these small t traumas, which are chronic experiences that chip away at your self-worth, your sense of safety, and your ability to trust. And then my own life forced me to take a deeper look at that, because I was in a marriage that was destroying me. And from the outside looking in, I looked like I probably had it all together. I was strong, I was capable, but I was ignoring my own intuition. I was overriding my own nervous system. I was telling myself, I just need to be more resilient. And I was performing strength while abandoning myself. And leaving that marriage was one of the hardest decisions of my life. And I doubted myself a lot, but it was the catalyst of change for me. And doing my own internal work around that, which wasn't an intellectual process, is what really changed me. And so I started seeing the same thing in high achievers that I work with. I was really drawn to entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders. And as you would imagine, as you do more of your own inner work, and I was doing that with these clients, their businesses grew. They were struggling. It's not because they didn't know what to do. It wasn't an intellectual issue. I work with very intelligent people. They were struggling because of what was going on in the subconscious. The more we did this work, the more their businesses and their lives changed. Today, I'm an executive psychology coach. I'm also a licensed professional counselor, certified EMDR clinician, and I've done things like talked on stages and co-founder of SoFree, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point. But if you strip all of that away, what I really do is I help high achievers to understand why they can look so successful on the outside and still feel pressure, anxiety, and misalignment on the inside, because it's not a strategy problem. It's a nervous system and identity problem. And I know that because I've lived it. I think that's why my work resonates with people so much, because I've had to dismantle my own armor around it.
That's fantastic. So when I listened to your TEDx talk, correct me, but the title is something like Changing the Narrative Around Trauma. All I could think of, and everybody's got to listen to the TEDx talk on their own, but it takes it from a situation with a child to a situation with an adult, and what I wouldn't have classified as trauma. And maybe that's your whole point.
Right.
It's like when I look at something that's said to a child of 8 years old, you don't classify it as trauma, but if they remember it and it sticks with them, then it has that underlying effect that you're talking about. So what it did was force me to start thinking, even as successful entrepreneurs, we limit the belief in ourselves because of something that we grew up with all along. I'll tell a personal story that I probably never told before, but my parents were both gym teachers, physical education teachers. I grew up in a great family, very loving, and I was told all along that I could teach in any gym that I wanted to, and I had that opening in my life. For me, going out on a limb and starting my own business was my trauma of my mindset that I was limited to what I was doing. And not that there's anything wrong with being a gym teacher. I think I would have been a good gym teacher, but there was this other option for me. I think your talk kind of zeroes in a little bit with everybody. It's just a matter of how much trauma and what you consider trauma. Real quick question, because I know our listeners are thinking. So you said you were involved in a lot of sports. What sports?
So my main sports were basketball and indoor volleyball growing up. Now I play tennis, and I used to do martial arts for a long time.
Okay, interesting. And you went to school in Georgia, am I right there?
Correct.
Okay, and that's where you live now, or?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe a little bit too deep for the conversation right now, but there's an emotional trauma based on the way high achieving coaches coach.
Yeah.
And we've all heard the stories about Coach Knight at Ohio and how he was an abusive style coach with a men's college basketball team. And some athletes respond to it and some don't. Is there a specific thing that an athlete should keep in mind, or a coach? So a lot of my entrepreneurs are still coaching.
Love to dig into that.
Okay, so give us some advice on how to avoid or how to deal with it when we see it happening.
Sure. Let me explain a little bit about what's going on in the brain, because I think that coaches who coach that way, they think they're helping and they don't realize what's going on under the hood from a scientific level. And that's important. So when I say the word trauma, and that's an overused buzzword and it gets such a bad rap, one of the things I talk about in my talk is that the word literally means wound. That's all it means. And we all have them. And wound can mean a lot of different things for a lot of people. Stephen, you and I could go through the same experience and it could not bother you one bit, and it could bother me a lot because we are wired differently. It could create a wound in me and not in you. So it's very subjective in some ways. So when a coach is critical, is coming down on a person, is trying to motivate through fear or criticism in some sort of way. And I've had coaches like that. And what is happening is that not only are they activating the fight or flight system in their athlete's body, so their threat detection part of the body's going off, which is, on one hand, it's making them move and go because it's creating adrenaline and all these stress hormones and things like that. On the other hand, depending on your athlete, it's creating self-worth issues. It's creating certain beliefs about self that they may be internalizing. And over time, what happens is that 95% of the brain is subconscious. What you and I are doing right here, right now, 5% of our brain consciousness. So that means 95% of your athlete's behavior is going to be coming from the unconscious mind. So when there are coaching styles that are hypercritical or verbally abusive or affect their athlete's self-worth or value, then what's going to happen over time time is that athlete is going to start to shut down because they are subconsciously forming a negative belief about themselves. And they might start to feel like they're not good enough. They might start to feel like they're a failure or not capable. And with all the athletes that I've even coached on the sports psychology side of things, this is a very real thing. And that's going to start showing up in their negative self-talk when they make a mistake. And they may not ever verbalize that, but that's what's going to happen.
Is it possible that it works, but it's still doing some damage?
Yeah, absolutely. The research will show you that athletes who experience coaches like this, and I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head because I didn't prepare that for this, but they are extremely more likely to have depression and anxiety down the road than the ones who don't. They're going to have more mental health issues because the nature of the negativity and what that does to how they internalize certain beliefs about themselves. And so take the inverse of it, for example. So there is research on what separates the top 5% of athletes from the top 20% of athletes nationally. And so this was a study done for pro tennis players. And it showed that the top 5% in the world, the one thing that separated them from the top 20%, it wasn't nutrition, it wasn't sleep, it wasn't even how they practice. Like they're already good at all of that stuff. It was the first thing they think to themselves after they make a mistake. And it was having a good mindset around that. People who get put down and are criticized, they don't have helpful self-talk. They don't think good about themselves after they make a mistake. Their inner critic comes out because that's how their coach treats them. And so they are more likely to have self-fulfilling prophecies of making mistakes down the road. They may do well for a season, but that's going to catch up to them because they're going to start to essentially have performance-based acceptance of themselves. And when that wears off because they're not performing well, they're going to tank.
Okay, so let me go a different direction for a minute. So now you have a coach that's more mild in their approach, is very complimentary, a talented athlete that is continually being told how good they are and how great they are.
That's grandiosity. So we're talking about two extremes that do two different things.
Right.
We're talking about a type of coaching that puts someone towards shame, which is all about self, still too much focus on self. And then we're talking about coaching that makes someone feel so inflated that it leads towards grandiosity and entitlement, still too much about self. Right.
At some point, they're raising their own bar in their own head to a certain level that maybe it's not achievable. I see parents of little leaguers saying, my son's got a big league arm. My son's going to get a scholarship. My son's, in reality, we know that not many kids get scholarships.
Right. Sure. I think it can go one of two ways for kids like that when they've been told that. Either they end up believing that I am loved and accepted only if I achieve.
Okay.
Or I'm entitled because I'm the best and therefore I'm better than.
If they think that they're better, how does that affect them later, maybe in adulthood?
Have you ever worked with someone who is kind of narcissistic, or someone who doesn't have empathy for others, or someone who doesn't care about your opinion because they think that they're right and you're wrong?
Right.
That's what happens.
The ones with empathy are going to be your better leaders long term. And the better leaders are the more successful entrepreneurs. And one of the things that I like and what I hear from everything you say is that you have to take some time. Even successful entrepreneurs have to take some time to nurture themselves. I do it all the time with the simple things that I deal with. You're a great leader, but you have a poor fitness program, or you're not eating right, or you're not getting enough sleep.
The brain has a very specific function where it will scan and fixate on what you make important. For instance, when I do some sports psychology with a client, when they constantly think to themselves, or let's say that they make a big deal about a mistake in their mind. Ah, man, I swung the bat wrong, or I did this wrong, or whatever it is. Their mind is going to hyper focus on a mistake because they've made a big deal out of it. Therefore, it's more likely to make a mistake again. So when a coach makes a huge deal out of things in a critical way, the player is going to do that And over time, they're more likely to make those mistakes. You might get the outcome you want initially because of fear, but it's not sustainable.
I may have mentioned this to you before, but a book that I really like was written by Jason Selk called Relentless Solution Focus. And he talks about when something negative happens, you've got 30 seconds to a minute to get back and be concentrating on a solution. If you think, oh, I struck out, I had a bad swing, he's going to throw me another pitch, I can't, all of a sudden you can't do it because you've manifested that in your head.
The scientific part of the brain that we call manifestation is the reticular activating system. That's why when you buy a red car and then you start seeing that same red car everywhere, that's the reticular activating system. We call it manifestation, but that's what that is.
I personally never wash my car, so I think nobody washes their car. So that's my thing. But I'll have to get you that book. You would like that book. Jason Selk was originally a gymnastic coach, and then he became a mental coach, and he was the mental coach for the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team. And he helped them win 2 world championships through positive mental attitude and relentless solution focus. 2 questions. One, is there trauma from childhood that is still in our brain that's still affecting us? And 2, is there an exercise or a procedure that we should go to release that? And I hope this leads into talk about your app.
Let's take out the word trauma.
Okay.
I think people get hung up on that word. Do we have things from our past that still affect us in our present? Most likely. And we will see this in quiet ways we cope. Some of times that looks like not being able to slow down because we don't want to sit with our thoughts and feelings. Sometimes that looks like numbing out with food and alcohol and other things. Sometimes that looks like having overreactions to things. One of the things I talked about in my talk is I make a joke out of this, but it's getting mad at the dirty dishes in the sink. It's not about the dirty dishes. It's your subconscious remembering every time you felt unheard or unseen. And what happens is our mind takes our past experiences with what's going on in our present to try to make a prediction. And if there are unresolved issues from our past, then we're going to have reactions in the present we don't like or that don't serve us well. That's going to let you know that we have unsorted issues. Bruce Springsteen talks about this in his autobiography, and that's someone who's I would say, a high achiever. He talks about 25 years of being in psychoanalysis and in his own therapy, and he talks about how we all have unsorted baggage, and the cost of unsorted baggage is always going to be paid in tears in some ways.
I feel like by the pressure we put on children in sports, and I'm working on a keynote right now that is talking about the challenge within youth sports right now because of the travel teams and this and that. But there are things said all along from you're not good enough for this team, or you're not tall enough to play basketball, or we already have a shortstop. There's little things that affect kids. So my goal in life is that everybody stays active and involved in sports as long as they can. I'm hoping that's the way I go on a court somewhere. But with kids, the crisis that we're facing in sports right now is parents are spending more and more money for sports and fewer kids are participating. There's something wrong there that we have to get. And statistically, of all the kids that play baseball, I'm a big baseball guy. Statistically, though, all the kids that play, 70% of them quit before they turn 13, which means they've never gotten to play on a full-size baseball field. And I think we have to be concerned with that. And is it something that we're either saying verbally or saying by the way we organize activities? And then maybe it's both. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that could be playing a part of it. I also think the lack of boundaries around our devices is playing a part of it. Being on our phones and screens and things like that's giving the brain so many hits of dopamine. I think we're not allowing our youth to experience sports and nature and all these other wonderful things the way our mind is intended to. And so it's not as engaging as it once was because the brain is getting all these other hits of dopamine in other ways, and that's distracting. And there's also so much more research out about how much less attention span kids have because of social media and phones and all of that stuff. So I think there's lots of things that are playing a part as to why that is happening. And when kids go for longer periods of time without using their phones and devices, they are more likely to engage in these types of activities. I don't think it's just that. I think we also have to look at the nature of our world right now, too.
I teeter-totter between if they were off the screens, they would do more sports. And if they were doing more sports, they'd be off the screens. I don't know, like I'm a chicken and the egg thing yet right
Yeah.
there. There's the book, The Distracted Generation is one where they talk about all the real effects that really come alive and little things like when you see a 15, 16-year-old that has trouble looking you eye to eye as an adult, that goes back to some other things that happened and things that they've been doing. Before we run out of time, I try to keep these to a half hour. It doesn't usually work, so I appreciate you going a little bit over here if we can. I want to get into your app.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? What made you think that you could create an app and what's its purpose?
So the app came about on a run one day, and I got the idea from the type of therapy that I do. There's a technique that I use in EMDR. It's called bilateral stimulation, and it's a simple technique that will help calm the nervous system down really quickly. So if anyone comes into my office and they're in a stress response or they're having anxiety or a panic attack, I am 100% confident that I can get them to a place of calm very quickly. And so I was like, why does no one know about this technique? And why hasn't it been combined with our technology? And so that's where the idea came from. And I went to my brother, who is the tech guy and has spent his whole career building technology, architect of technology, and wasn't sure what he would think of the idea. But I said, what if we had an app that could measure biometrics and detect your stress for you and then implement bilateral stimulation anytime, anywhere? Here's what we do in this type of therapy, blah, blah, blah. And he liked the idea. And we started working on it, and he owns a business, I own a business, and kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. And then very tragically and unexpectedly, we lost our oldest brother on Thanksgiving Day of 2022. And that changed our world. And after that, we wholeheartedly put everything we had into SoFree. And we wanted to do it because we needed it. We wanted to do it in honor of our brother. And we wanted to do it for people for when stress hits hard and you really need something, because we really needed something. It's a wellness app that will reset your nervous system in under 2 minutes using bilateral stimulation. And for the iPhone and Apple Watch currently, it will eventually be for Android. And it is currently free at the moment, so people take advantage of that. But what you do is you download it, it measures your biometrics. All you have to do is click a little button, and then it will send bilateral audio tones. So audio tones that go from the left and right side of your ear. There's also a visual component. You can track a ball with your eye. And then there's vibrations that go from, so haptic feedback that go from your phone to your watch on either side of your body. And you can pick and choose the ones you like. You can do them all together for an immersive experience. But at the end of it, you can see how your HRV's improved, your resting heart rate's improved, and it's a wonderful tool. I got a wonderful testimonial from a 5-time Ironman world champion athlete. Left me a message on my phone the other day and said, Mandy, I am just so impressed. One of the big obstacles that us extreme sport athletes have is getting our adrenaline down, and it affects our sleep. It affects so many things. She said, I've never been able to get my resting heart rate down so quickly, but I did after I used the app. And I had the best sleep score I've had, and I don't know how long, after I used the app for sleep that night. And so we are so excited about it. We can't wait for everyone to use it and try it. And I hope that it helps people as much as it's helped us.
So mention the name again and spell it just so that
Sure.
everybody gets it correctly.
So if you go to the Apple Store, it is SoFree, one word, SoFree, Reset Your Stress. You can go to our website website, getsofree.com, and you can read about it. There's a button you can click that will direct you to the link to download it as well. And yeah, check us out.
Yeah, it's very simple to get started. I did this already, so I found it. So if I can find it, anybody can. Ask a few simple questions and in a get to know you state. But it's very simple. It's very intriguing. So I think everybody's going to like it. And what I'm going to do is ask our audience to try it and send me their thoughts and comments. And then we're going to get you back on the podcast and we're going to get a user on here to kind of quiz you through it. Entrepreneurs, that's who I deal with all day long. We don't spend quite enough time on ourselves and we chalk that up to I'm not selfish or we take pride in that. I'm a big fitness guy. Like if you don't get to the gym, it doesn't have to be the gym, but if you don't get active, then you're missing something. And if you're not both talking to your brain and challenging your brain, then we're not going to grow as entrepreneurs. And I'm the one that believes that we're the ones that control the world.
Yep.
And all of my audience knows that I feel like those that are in a business of helping children are God's people, and it's awesome. I thank you for what you're doing. I don't have an Apple Watch. I have an old-fashioned
And you don't have to have an Apple Watch to use it. That's just one of the components on there. And so if you don't have one, you can still do the audio, you can still do the visual.
Yeah, it worked on my phone. Yeah, so yeah, it was good. What's next for you? Before I let you go, what's on the horizon? Is there TED Talk 2? Is there a stage performance? What are we doing next?
SoFree is headed to Vancouver in May. And we are in the pre-seed fundraising part of our business, and we are going to be at the Web Summit conference, and we are part of their pitch competition. So we'll be in front of a lot of the Silicon Valley investors and VCs. Wish us the best of luck. So that's on the radar. Hopefully this year there'll be more speaking opportunities and continuing to grow my business as well. But that's where we're at.
Yeah, so for all my friends that are listening, Mandy and I are in a little networking group where we're trying to help each other in the keynote and speaking business. And it's a lot of fun because we all have the same challenges. We all want to give back. So one last thing, I was just at a conference and one of the speakers wrote a book called Startup Different. And he created an app for safety on campus. And he got funding and he did it. But the book is about how he went through that process. You may find that very interesting.
Absolutely.
I got to meet him at this conference and I have this habit of just liking to talk to authors, and he was fascinating. Really appreciate you coming on. Change my focus. Hopefully some other people are thinking about this. They will send me some notes. We will put connections to Mandy in the show notes and send them out. And who knows, they may have a boatload of questions for you, Mandy.
I'm ready for it. Thank you so much for having me on. I really
Thank
appreciate you.
Really appreciate you coming on. So thank you. Everyone, make it a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to Paradigm Playbook. Explore more at ParadigmPlaybook.com. Want to be a playmaker? Contact StephenJCook.com. Share this episode to spread the word about sports industry opportunities. See you next week.